In 2019, a tractor built when Jimmy Carter was in the White House sold for $61,000 in Bingham Lake, Minnesota. That line gets repeated like proof that old farm iron turned into a collectible. And in one sense, it did. The 8-to-26-hour 1979 John Deere 4640 really did bring $61,000, and the buyer was John Kinzenbaugh for his museum collection. But that is exactly why the real story is bigger than the headline. Because underneath the museum money, thousands of farmers were arriving at the same conclusion for a very different reason. Old Deere iron was not just nostalgic, it was still economically alive. Today, replacement class Deere money is not 60 grand, it is deep into six figures. Deere's own site surfaced a dealer-advertised 6R250 at $369,900, and late-model 7R230s are commonly listed around $269,900 to $339,000. So when a farmer walks into an auction barn and bids hard on a 4440 or 4640, that is not automatically a love letter to the past. In a lot of cases, it is a refusal to sign up for a very expensive future. That is the part most people miss. They think this is old iron versus new tech. It is not. It is capital cost versus repair control. It is paid for steel versus financed software. It is a machine you can understand with your ears and your hands versus a machine that may still need a dealer laptop to become fully itself again. And once you look at it that way, the auction prices stop looking crazy. Because the truly important number was never that museum-grade $61,000 4640. The important numbers are the working tractors. In 2025, a John Deere 4440 with 9,183 hours sold in Illinois for $25,500. Another with 3,163 hours brought $40,000. Machinery. Pete's current 4440 data puts the range roughly from $53,900 to $42,500, and dealer listings still show field-use 4440s around the high 30s. That is not collector fantasy. That is a real market for machines people still expect to use. And that market only makes sense if the tractor underneath it earned that trust. The reason the 4440 matters starts in Waterloo, Iowa. John Deere built the 4440 from 1978 to 1982 as part of the Iron Horses line, and it became the most popular tractor in that series. On paper, it was not exotic. A 7.6-litre, 6-cylinder diesel, a choice of 16-speed quad-range or 8-speed power shift, closed-center hydraulics flowing 23 gallons a minute, and a sound guard cab that made long days more survivable than many rivals of the time. But the paper only tells part of the story. The bigger point is that Deere got the balance right. Enough horsepower to do serious row crop work. Enough simplicity to keep the machine serviceable. Enough weight and hydraulic muscle to be useful for decades instead of one finance cycle. Even the test numbers still explain the reputation. The Nebraska tractor test for the 4440 recorded 130.58 PTO horsepower and 112.69 drawbar horsepower. The larger 4640 posted 156.30 PTO horsepower and a maximum drawbar pull above 15,000 pounds. Those are not brochure fantasies, they are test lab numbers, and they help explain why these tractors became the backbone of real farms instead of weekend collections. They were not beautiful because they were old, they became valuable because they were useful. And Deere kept refining them in service too. On the 4440, the rear axle size was increased at the end of the first production year from 86 millimeters to 92. That is a tiny detail. It is also the kind of tiny detail that tells you what kind of tractor this was. Not decorative engineering, but load-bearing engineering. Steel adjusted after real use. The sort of change that matters 40 years later when a farmer asks the only question that counts. Will this thing hold together when it is time to work? This is where the video changes shape, because the old tractor story is usually told as nostalgia. The better reading is system failure. Modern tractors are more capable, more comfortable, and vastly more precise. None of that is imaginary, but capability is not the same thing as ownership. In January 2025, the FTC accused Deere of practices that limited farmers and independent repair shops, saying the only fully functional software repair tool capable of performing all repairs on Deere equipment was available only to authorized dealers. In April 2026, Deere agreed to a $99 million settlement in a separate class action and committed to make digital tools for maintenance, diagnosis, and repair available for 10 years. Companies do not agree to settlements like that because farmers were happy with the status quo. That is the repair trap. Not that new tractors are bad, that when they are down, the person who owns the iron may not fully control the fix. The FTC's language was blunt. Dealer-only access could force farmers toward higher-cost repairs and delayed service at exactly the worst moment. On a farm, delay is not an inconvenience. Delay is weather, moisture, crop condition, labor timing, and cash flow. A breakdown during planting or harvest is not measured in annoyance. It is measured in acres. And Deere's own precision ag ecosystem shows why this tension keeps growing. The 4640 universal display is marketed as improving the operating experience for older John Deere tractors and mixed fleets, but Deere also notes Precision Ag Core subscriptions on that display, plus JDA Link subscription requirements for some wireless functions. So the modern value proposition is clear: more guidance, more documentation, more automation, more connectivity. The catch is also clear: more layers between the operator and the machine. That is why farmers are not just buying old tractors, they are splitting the tractor into two separate problems. Problem 1 is powertrain, hydraulics, transmission, drawbar work, PTO work, the basic act of turning diesel into field labor. For that, a 4440 or 4640 can still make sense. Problem 2 is precision, guidance, straight lines, coverage, section control, fatigue reduction. For that, farmers no longer have to buy the entire new tractor. This is the move that changes everything. Retrofit guidance kits with RTK-level ambitions are being sold specifically for older tractors, with examples in the $4,090 to $5,090 range. And Deere's own display ecosystem explicitly pitches usefulness for older John Deere machines and mixed fleets. In plain English, that means a farmer can bolt modern guidance logic onto analog steel. Not every operation will want to do it. Not every tractor is tight enough in the front end to steer beautifully. But the principle is the breakthrough. You can decouple precision ag from the financing burden of a brand new tractor. And once that becomes possible, the old machine stops being old in the way outsiders think. A 1979 tractor with reliable hydraulics, proven transmission choices, available parts, and a retrofit steering system is no longer competing against a 2026 tractor on glamour. It is competing on return. That is why the cleanest old ones bring shocking money. A low-hour, one-owner museum-grade 4640 at $61,000 is the headline everyone remembers. But the deeper signal is the rest of the market. 5,000-hour 4440s around the low 30s, 3,000-hour examples at 40, 9,000-hour tractors still pulling mid-20s, and one-owner 4440s still working with 15,000 hours on them. Rich Hergert's Colorado 4440 had 15,000 hours and was still one of his favorite tractors. That is the number that really settles the argument. Not because every 4440 will make it there untouched, but because a platform that can still be relevant at 15,000 hours has crossed out of nostalgia and into infrastructure. And the economics follow that durability. In 1982, a 4440 listed around $38,397 in quad-range open station form, or $45,141 in PowerShift cab trim. 4 decades later, field use examples still sell in the same broad nominal neighborhood. That is absurd on the surface, until you remember what changed around the tractor. The machine aged. The repair logic did not age in the same way. The software layers did not. The capital burden did not. The control of the owner did not. So, the old tractor held value not just because it lasted, but because the world around it made its simplicity more valuable than simplicity used to be. That is the real redemption story of the Iron Horse series. Deere did not set out to build a rebellion against software lock-in. In 1978, it built a powerful, comfortable, practical, row crop tractor for American farms. What happened later is the part nobody planned. As tractors got smarter, more expensive, more connected, and, in some cases, harder to fully control without the manufacturer's ecosystem, the 4440 and 4640 changed meaning. They stopped being old tractors. They became a form of leverage. A wrenchable tractor with good bones is one kind of asset. A wrenchable tractor with proven auction liquidity, parts support, and the ability to accept modern guidance is another kind entirely. That is why the bidders keep showing up. Not because 1979 was better than 2026, because for a lot of farms, ownership was. So, which side are you on, old iron or new tech? Tell us in the comments, and if this is your kind of machine story, subscribe to Stubborn Iron, because farmers are not the only people who figured this out. American truckers have been hunting a dead engine for 30 years, and that story is next.